My name is Ethan Hale, and the day my grandfather's will was read, my entire family thought they had already won. They arrived early. My uncles were smiling. My cousins whispered about yachts, estates, and trust funds, because my grandfather, Victor Hale, had been one of the richest men in our state, a billionaire industrialist, a man who built shipping ports, logistics companies, and energy investments across 3 continents. Everyone in the room believed the fortune would be divided between them, except me. I sat quietly in the back of the lawyer's office wearing a cheap suit I had borrowed from a friend. My savings account had less than $100. I worked as a warehouse supervisor. To my family, I was the forgotten grandson, the quiet one, the one who had never asked for money, and definitely not the one anyone expected to inherit billions. Then the lawyer cleared his throat and said the words that changed everything. According to Mr. Victor Hale's final will, the majority of his estate is being transferred to a single heir. My uncle leaned forward confidently. My cousin smiled. Everyone assumed it would be one of them. The lawyer opened the final document. Then he said my name, Ethan Hale. The room went completely silent. My uncle stood up so fast his chair crashed onto the floor. "That's impossible." My cousin laughed nervously. "This has to be some mistake." But the lawyer calmly slid a thick stack of legal documents across the table. The estate valuation is approximately $3.8 billion. And suddenly, every pair of eyes in the room was staring at me. But before I tell you why my billionaire grandfather left everything to the one person nobody expected, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment your city below. I read every comment. Now let me explain why the richest man in my family chose the poorest grandson as his heir. Growing up, my grandfather was more like a myth than a person. He lived in a massive estate outside the city, a place most of the family only visited during holidays. My uncles constantly tried to impress him. They talked about investments, corporate strategy, profit margins, but I never had much to say. Instead, whenever I visited, I usually ended up sitting quietly on the porch with him. We talked about simple things, fishing, old stories from when he started his first trucking company. He once told me something I never forgot. "Most people think money makes them powerful," he said, "but money only reveals who they really are." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant, but years later, I would. When my grandfather died, the family gathered for the will reading in a large downtown law office. Everyone was dressed like they were attending a business meeting instead of a funeral. My Uncle Richard had already started planning what he would do with his share. My cousin Lisa whispered about buying property in Europe. I sat quietly in the back, expecting nothing. The lawyer began reading. First came the smaller distributions, charities, employee bonuses, research foundations. Then the real assets. Corporate shares, luxury properties, investment funds. Each item was carefully listed. My relatives nodded as if they were already calculating their new wealth. Then the lawyer reached the final section. He paused, then opened a sealed envelope. This section contains a recorded message from Mr. Victor Hale. He pressed play. A video appeared on the screen. My grandfather sat behind his desk, looking directly into the camera. "If you're watching this," he said calmly, "then my family is probably arguing." Several people shifted uncomfortably. He continued, "For years, I watched many of you compete for my approval. You believed my money was a reward." He paused. "But wealth is not a reward. It is a responsibility." Then he said something that made the entire room turn toward me. The only person who never asked me for anything was Ethan. My uncle muttered under his breath, but the video continued. "When Ethan visited me, he didn't ask about money. He asked about how the business actually worked. He asked how employees were treated. He asked how decisions affected thousands of families who depended on our companies." My grandfather leaned closer to the camera.
So I made a decision. My entire controlling estate will go to the only person who understood the difference between ownership and greed. The video ended. The lawyer folded his hands. The transfer documents are already finalized. My uncle slammed his fist on the table. "This is fraud!" But the lawyer shook his head. The estate was transferred into a trust structure 6 months ago. That decision cannot be contested. That was the moment everything changed, because suddenly my family stopped seeing me as invisible. Now I was something else entirely, a problem. Over the next few weeks, my phone started ringing constantly. My uncle called asking for business meetings. My cousins suddenly wanted to reconnect. Even relatives who had ignored me for years began sending friendly messages. But the most shocking moment came 1 month later, when my uncle showed up at my apartment with a stack of papers. "You can't possibly manage this empire alone," he said. "We need to control the companies." He slid a contract across the table, a document that would transfer majority control of the estate to him. I looked at it quietly. Then I remembered something my grandfather once told me while we were fishing together. Money shows you who people really are. So I pushed the contract back across the table. "No." My uncle stared at me. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," I said, "but it's my mistake to make." Because the truth is, inheriting billions doesn't just change your life, it reveals the truth about everyone around you. And sometimes the people who feel most entitled to your success are the ones who never believed in you when you had nothing. So tell me honestly, if your family tried to take control of your inheritance, what would you do?